Hello everybody. In today's video I'll be showing you how to replace the brake and fuel lines on your car. This is not to be confused with the brake hoses which are attached to the calipers, but rather the metal brake and fuel pipes which start rusting and leaking on older vehicles over time. I'll be demonstrating this today on my 2002 Acura TL Type-S. So as you can already tell, this is going to be a longer video, so feel free to check out the description where you will find timestamps to better navigate through the video, as well as additional information and links to parts used. If you have any comments, tips, tricks, or questions throughout this video, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. So let's get started with a quick inspection. So we're under the rear driver side of the vehicle, and we're just going to take a quick look at these lines and you'll understand why I need to replace them. And they are just all completely rusted. Rust, rust, and more rust. All the way down. But more specifically, back here are the two brake lines. And these are even more so rusted. And you can see my brake fluid leak. There's this kind of fluid all around there. So that is why I am replacing my brake and fuel lines, because usually if one's rusted through, the others aren't far behind. And plus, the one thing about rusted lines is they're not as bendy and pliable anymore as they used to be. If you're messing around near these lines here and you bend them just right or you nick it just right, they're very brittle and easy to crack, and soon enough you'll have fuel leak as well. So it is best practice to just replace everything all at the same time. Before we start, we're just going to go over a couple things that we need. We're going to need some flare nut wrenches, both a 10 and 14 millimeter. We're going to need a fuel line quick disconnect tool. We're also going to need 2 or 3 bottles of Honda DOT3 brake fluid. I've got some tapered silicone plugs right here, and also we're going to need some brake lines. So normally I get the OEM parts for my vehicle, however not going to this time, because as you can see, the lines that come for the car are one solid continuous line all the way from the front of the vehicle to the rear of the vehicle. Same thing with the brake lines. You can see it starts at the front driver side, goes to the rear driver side, all the way across and to the rear passenger side. And there's no way you're going to get these OEM lines on the car. So instead, we're going to go to this cool website I found. It's called linestogo.com. They're based in Canada. So let's select brake lines. And you can see they've got a bunch of older vehicles. They still have like Mercury, Oldsmobile, Pontiac, Saturn, Suzuki, etc. So let's select Acura. And I have a TL. And let's select the rear set. And here's my 2002. And you can see they're about $200, made with stainless steel. And they come in a bunch of nice individual little sections for significantly easier installation. And they got a nice description down here. They also give you the part numbers, the OEM part numbers, so you can ensure that you're getting the correct parts. And same thing, let's go to the top and select fuel lines. Acura, TL, and here's my 2002. And again, they come in multiple sections. And these actually have stainless steel wrapped Teflon to make installation significantly easier up in the engine bay. And although it's not shown in the picture, it does actually come with the little quick disconnect clips on the end of these lines. So that was really nice of them. Also, if you don't have one, I can't guarantee that everyone's going to be able to remove the fuel lines like I did in my video. You'll see later on that I actually break the clips off in order to get my fuel lines off. But that's not an option for everybody, so if you don't already have one, I might recommend getting a quick disconnect tool in your arsenal. And again, got Galfin coated steel for rust prevention. Definitely some high quality products for sure. So here's just a quick look at those brake and fuel pipes. And while we're at it, we're gonna line everything up in accordance to those diagrams. The brake lines are towards the outside of the car, and then the fuel lines are towards the inside of the car. And so that's kind of how I plan on going about this project, starting by removing the brake lines, work my way inward, and then reverse installation, start with the fuel lines and end with the brake lines. So here we are. You come with everything all ready to go. Everything's pre-bent. You don't need to do any post-ship bending. And they also have nice color marks on there so you can easily match and line everything up. And these are all made of nice stainless steel. And then up towards these fuel lines, they also have nice stainless steel wrapped Teflon. So they definitely didn't cheap out on these. And again, you got color coordination on all of them. And just line them up like that. So to start things off, we're gonna come under the hood, and inside here, there is a fuse puller. We're gonna grab our little fuse puller, and then we're gonna come to the driver's side door, and we're going to remove the fuel pump fuse. 15 amp fuse right at the bottom there. We're gonna take that out. Next, we're gonna come in the car and we're gonna start the vehicle to relieve all that fuel pressure. And hopefully it should turn off in about 10 or 20 seconds. Not even. So we didn't even have to start the car. We just cranked it a couple times and that fuel pressure should be released. Next, we're going to set our e-brake. And we're gonna jack up all four corners of the car and place it on some jack stands. So we have the vehicle jacked up, all the wheels are off, and we've got cardboard under the vehicle. And we're gonna start with those brake lines. But first, we're gonna come over to the brake fluid reservoir right there. And we're just gonna try and top it off a little bit. I'm a little bit below that max fill line, that should be good enough. We just wanna ensure that if any fluid leaks out that we don't introduce air into the system. And also make sure you put your cap back on so there isn't any air relief from the top, and it will minimize any spillage. We have to next remove this plastic trim that goes all the way down the car. So I'm at the back passenger corner of the car, and ideally you would want to remove this 10mm nut in order to remove this little bracket. However, it is completely rusted and rounded off immediately, even with a 6-point socket. So instead, everything's just so rusted. I tried taking a needle nose pliers, pinching it, and then taking a screwdriver and kind of wedging it under there and prying it out. Broke that one, but luckily this one did not break. I was able to get that one through, and I'm just kind of bending it back and out of the way. So next, moving on down, you'll start to come across these little plastic nuts. Those are a 17mm, and if you want to give those a quarter turn on all of them all the way down. There's another one there, and there's another one eventually down there. You can kind of see. We'll kind of loosen up those plastic nuts. And then we'll go in the middle here, and there are these little tabs. We're gonna take a needle nose pliers, kind of pinch those and push them through. And then we can take our flathead screwdriver and we can work this nut out. And so we're gonna come back to the middle again, and we're gonna push these little tabs through, and we're gonna separate these two pieces right in the middle. So we're gonna work our way a little more forward towards the front of the car, towards that next plastic nut that we removed. And you'll see a little white clip here. We're gonna push that clip through, and then we're gonna kind of disconnect all these lines from this plastic holder here. So I've found that if you kind of wedge your screwdriver under this first fin here, and then kind of press against each of the lines, that's usually a good way to disconnect them. And working our way all the way up to the front of the car now, there was again another bracket sitting right in there, held in by a single 10mm. It's a pretty tight squeeze with your ratchet in there, just like this. Pretty tedious, but it came out. And then again, we'll work at pushing this little clip through, kind of separating the lines from this plastic holder. And again, there's another clip up in there, a couple more pinch tabs, and we're gonna try and remove this plastic piece. And so we've got everything loose, but we're gonna come to the back of this piece here, and you can see there's one more little push tab right there that we have to separate in this whole plastic piece. We'll come right on out. So we got that big old plastic piece out in the front, and it'll be a similar process in the back. I'm gonna push these little pinch tabs through and just keep disconnecting the lines from the plastic piece as we go down. There's another little tab right there we'll push through. Again, this is our connection point for all those lines. We'll use our screwdriver to disconnect it. Another little tab right there. And just keep working our way down, and this plastic piece will come out the exact same way. So now you'll notice some of these little kind of retainers. It connects all the pipes together to keep them nice and still and stable. And we gotta remove it. And I've got this really awesome pick tool here, link in the description. And what I kind of did was I just put it in there and kind of work the clip out like that. And we'll do that to each of the pipes, and we'll remove these clips. So we've got all those clips that hold all the pipes together removed all the way down. And now we're just gonna follow each line just to make sure that there aren't any more additional clips. Some clips right here and there. We'll just undo these clips. So to remove this bracket, it's held in by a single 10mm bolt, but as you can see, it's completely rusted, and as expected, it rounded when I tried to remove it, so I just bent this bracket back. And then at the very top of this white clip here, you can use your pick tool and remove it like that. There's also one more clip up front that we gotta remove way down in there, held in by a single 10mm nut, I think that is. You'll need a deep socket to get over that bolt, and that should come right out. With all of the lines clear and ready to be removed, we're gonna start with that outer brake line, and again, make sure the reservoir is full, make sure that cap is on, and we're gonna start with that front brake line. So I've got that first flare nut removed and my tapered silicone plug in place. The plug does a great job, but some brake fluid will continue to very slowly leak through the threads, so make sure to have some cardboard under the vehicle. And again, we're at the back of the vehicle, driver's side of the vehicle, and now we're going to break this nut loose and be prepared for any spills. Oh, there we go. That clip is held in by a nut that cannot be removed at all because this is the subframe, and we are not removing the subframe. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut the pipe right here and cut the pipe a little bit more back there. So we got this out, and it didn't leak too much fluid initially. And next what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this brake line right about here. And now we gotta cut off behind it. I'm not getting my cutter back there, so I'm gonna use a Dremel and cut the back part of it off. And also I'm just gonna remove this ABS wire. There's a 10mm bolt right here. You can remove that to get this bracket out of the way, and that'll give us some more working space. And that worked beautifully. I highly recommend getting a Dremel. So as we start to try and maneuver this line out, already noticing that there's just a couple more things in the way as we follow the line, such as this evap filter, I think this is. And so we're gonna have to just take a needle nose pliers and undo those two little clips there, just so I can create a space for this line to come through. So we were able to maneuver this part past the little bracket there, and now we should be able to hopefully just kind of pull this wire straight down and out. Take a mental note of the path that it took coming out, so you know exactly how to put it back in when you put the new one in. So as we move forward removing these old lines, we're going to be cutting them up into multiple pieces to make removal much easier, and when doing so, they're going to leak fluid, so make sure to have some cardboard ready. So we cut this line right in half, and now it should be pretty easy to pull straight up and out of the engine bay. And same thing, we just gotta maneuver that brake line over those other lines down there, and we can pull the whole thing out. So we're at the back passenger wheel now, and we're gonna break this one loose now. There it goes. We're gonna come under the hood and just undo this brake line connection first, and then we'll cut the line in half to let that fluid drain out. And then once you disconnect those lines, don't forget to put your tapered silicone plug in there. And once those are pretty much done dripping, or at least dripping slowly, I'll make a corner at that front corner, make another cut at that back corner, make one at this back passenger corner, as well as we got the same situation with that stupid bracket being up against the subframe there. So I'm gonna make a little cut in front and behind of that bracket as well. And then we'll work on removing the lines. So we got those brake lines out. It was pretty easy to remove them after cutting them up into multiple sections. And now it's time to move on to the fuel lines. And so we have to start by disconnecting this fuel feed line here. And we're gonna use our fuel line quick disconnect tool. Remember, it's a 5/16, and you'll basically just slide it over it. And then we'll push in and we'll disconnect the line. We're gonna do it in the back here, not up in front by the engine bay, because if gasoline does spray all over, we certainly don't want it to spray over a really hot engine. So we're gonna do it back here. Remember to have some eye protection. So the concept behind these quick disconnect lines is pretty basic. You got this little clip in the center here, and there's a little rib that it's caught on. And so to remove your quick disconnect line, you'll take your tool here, wrap it around, slide it on in, and bam, it should just disconnect super easy. But in reality, that is not the case. After messing with this for forever, I was unable to simply pull it off using the quick disconnect tool. What I just figured out was I took my little pick tool here, I got under those little clips, then I took my needle nose pliers and I just completely ripped them out. Both sides. They're not needed unless you're planning on reusing the clip, but these new lines that I got come with new clips, so I don't have to worry about breaking these and messing them up. So after you do that, you can grab a nice set of pliers and you can get a good grip, pinch it like that, stick a flathead screwdriver in there, and then you can wedge it apart like that. And so I'm about to get it, so I might make a mess here. Let's get everything set up. There it goes. I was messing with this for probably close to an hour or two now. Looking up. All right. Here we go. Yep, there it goes. Trying to not get my arm wet. There we are. And it's leaking fluid as suspected. That's supposed to happen. And it's all done leaking. We got it. So I hope that tip saves a lot of people a lot of time. Now we can come to the front of the vehicle and we can take our 14mm flare nut wrench and we can remove this bolt. And again, we're gonna take our cutters here and we're gonna make a couple cuts, maybe at this back corner, another at that front corner, to help removing the line easier. Also, if you ever need to make cuts on these lines, obviously since we're working with fuel lines right now, do not use any form of grinder, Dremel, or anything else that could make a spark, because you will start a fire and that would be not good. And again, have some cleanup materials ready because it's gonna leak more fuel. So now we'll work on this second quick disconnect tubing here. This is the fuel return line. So that means there's also going to be fuel in this line, so be prepared for a little bit of a spill. Feel free to make any necessary cuts anywhere along the line down there to make it nice and easy to remove. And again, we're just going to break off those little tabs. We'll get our pliers and then we'll kind of pry the rest of the way off. So to remove this rubber line here, it's gonna be really stuck on there. It's been on there for over 300,000 miles. So what I found worked best is take a pick tool like this and get it started under the hose a little bit, and then spray some liquid wrench penetrating oil right where your pick tool's inserted, and then try and work that penetrating fluid in, swirl the pick tool around the pipe, and then it should be able to pop right off. It took me less than 30 seconds. Now, if the tube doesn't come off right away, maybe just give it a couple minutes. Sometimes penetrating fluid just needs a couple minutes to work its way in. Also, you can try taking the hose and twisting it. And sometimes you'll feel it almost break loose, and then it comes off pretty easy that way as well. And then with this last rubber line again, we can just move the clamp back, and then you can remove that final fuel line, and we are all done removing the lines. So now we're gonna work towards putting the new lines in, and we're gonna start with that evap line. And before we do that, we gotta transfer these clips back over. So we're just gonna kind of line it up and make some marks so we can put them back on. So we'll do that first. So now we can guide that first fuel evaporative line up through the bottom of the engine bay. And instead of using that old rusted metal clamp, we're gonna use this nice stainless steel hose clamp. These are just the best. They don't rust. They're super easy to use. I don't know why they don't just use these on all clamps. So I'm gonna put one of these on, and we can attach the other end to the hose coming off the evap canister and shutoff valve, and then we can work on connecting these two middle ends together. To connect these center points, you're gonna need a 3/4 and a 5/8 inch wrench. Now we can work on putting this next fuel return line in. So we got it guided through the bottom again, and then we're gonna connect it to this fuel return line. And if you haven't already, we gotta remove the little clip that's inside here, because we're gonna be putting a new one in. You just pinch these ends and it comes out relatively easy. Okay, and with that metal line in place, we're gonna reconnect it to the quick connector here. And we've got the white plastic part already on the metal line. And let's see if we can guide this in place. There we go, I heard it click. And with each of those ends attached, we can now connect them in the middle again. So I'll admit with this last one, it wasn't the easiest guiding it back in because there's actually a little bit of metal line, but with a little bit of maneuvering, you can fit it under there through the bottom. Take your time, maneuver it, turn it. Don't be afraid to tug on it a little harder than you think you need to. Now we can come in the engine bay and we can tighten down this 14mm flare nut. And it was pretty tricky to line up in my opinion. So if you're having difficulties with the two, there's a 10mm bolt right there and there that hold this unit in place. And that could help align this nut a little bit better, because you want to make absolutely sure that it is square and 90 degrees when putting it in so you don't cross the threads. And with this last fuel line, again, we'll get it in place and then make sure to take out the old clip and then have the new clip on your new hose. And we'll try and click it on. You might need to rotate it as necessary. There we go. Then we can come onto the car and reattach the center point, and we are all done hooking up the fuel lines. So now we can work at putting the brake lines back in. I'm on the passenger side of the car, and we're gonna take this single straight cross-sectional piece, and we're gonna just guide it over the muffler here, and you can see our clip up there. We'll guide it over and we'll clip it in place. Now we can install the rear passenger brake line. I put it in through the wheel well and pulled it out through under the car. You can clip it in place. And then we can take a 1/2 inch and a 10mm flare nut wrench and attach those two ends together. And so putting this flare nut back in to the brake hose is a little bit of a process, not too hard. You just gotta bend it a little bit. Since we can't put it back in that bracket, it's gonna be off to the side a little bit. So bend it so it's nice and square there, and start it by hand, and then you can tighten it down the rest of the way. Then we can put our little bracket back in place and reconnect this electrical connector. Now, unfortunately, things are gonna start getting a little bit hard again from here on out, I think. We have to connect that brake line up behind the canister here now. Kinda not hard to maneuver in there, but it is hard to access and get those threads started. Just have to reach around through here, maybe reach up by the muffler and kind of maneuver the lines, but just keep working at it, you'll get it. Just make sure that you're able to start it by hand. Don't just start cranking it. And speaking of which, it's hard to get wrenches in there too, so it's a little bit of a tedious process, but you'll get it. So what I think I'm gonna do is bend this one part right here back straight again, and hopefully I can get it back in there the same way we took it out from the bottom of the car up into the wheel well. Okay, and we've got this line bent somewhat straight, pretty straight overall. I think it should be good enough to maneuver it in there. So just for reference, here is the evap box. Here's that little canister that we disconnected before. And we got this fat tube here. We're gonna guide it behind that fat tube, and we're just gonna kinda follow the wheel well all the way back. It's sticking through now. And I think I'm actually gonna just kind of bring it a little extra far in, just so I can rebend right here so it's proper again. There we go, that's roughly in place, kind of next to that bracket. Also roughly right there. Gonna have to probably make some additional tweaks to the bend. And then following that line back down, there's that fat tube and there's the wheel well, and it comes down. It's gonna go through this yellow clip. It's gonna go above that bracket. So you're gonna have to kind of guide it past these two little tabs again. It'll come across, and then eventually it'll go on the other side of this small bracket so it can contour to this radius here and be held in by those clips all the way down there. So nice, now we gotta get the front one in. So we've got that first front brake line kind of started. You can see the end of the blue right there. And we have to maneuver it all the way back in that corner behind these lines. So it's kind of difficult. And unfortunately, I really can't get much further than this without bending it pretty badly. So I don't want to bend our new line. You can see under the car, it's already touching the ground. So what I think I'm gonna do is jack up the vehicle a bit more, and hopefully that'll give us some more wiggle room. So there's the start of my brake line. Got it about halfway down. And now what I need to do is turn it about 180 degrees before I push it the rest of the way down. Come on with the car, and you can see it's kind of angling forward. So I gotta get this jack stand out of the way for just a second, and we're gonna try and turn it around, and then hopefully we can pull it all the way through. And that worked perfectly. So before I get those other two ends connected on this line here, I think I'm gonna maneuver the other one in as well while it's all still loose, so I can have as much maneuverability as possible. So for this very last line, this is the one that goes to the rear driver's side wheel. Because it's so long, and also because I have the other line in there already, it's gonna make maneuverability a lot harder. So I'm not gonna be able to make that 360-degree rotation like I did with the other one. So I've made a little trace of this line, and I'm gonna make this bend perfectly straight. And I'm gonna guide it in like that. And with it being so long, it'll be able to bow and flex a lot easier, and I should be able to pull it through without much of an issue. And so again, we've got this line started all the way down through there, and also in the correct orientation, it is to the right of our first line. So we don't want them getting overlapped improperly. And then as we kind of continue to work it through, you'll see that it's just so long that it's just gonna glide right across this cardboard, and it shouldn't bend much, if any at all. And there we have it. It is in place. Really wasn't that hard. Of course, the hardest part is figuring it out, so I really hope this video has been helpful to everybody so far. So let's go under the car and bend that one little corner back in place. So before we hook them back up on top, we're gonna connect them under the car first to minimize wasting brake fluid and making a mess. And also don't worry about getting them mixed up, because obviously they are both completely different lengths. So we're gonna start with that back line first. And we just wanna ensure that we don't strip these threads. Make sure you can start it by hand. Do a lot of maneuvering, bend it slightly if you need to. Also, before you do this, just ensure that you've got some fluid in your brake fluid reservoir so you don't drain it and introduce air into the system. And there we have it. After a bunch of careful maneuvering and making sure we hand tighten them, both lines are officially in, and we have installed all of the new lines. However, we're not done yet. We gotta do a brake flush, get all the air out of the system, and we gotta make sure that the fuel system isn't leaking anywhere, and we also gotta put all those clips back. So let's get started with the next process. So now we're going to bleed the air out of the brake system, and every vehicle has a different bleeding sequence, so you can find this in the service manual for your car. This is the bleeding sequence for my car, and it's gonna start with the front driver side, then the front passenger side, rear passenger, and ending with the rear driver side. So we're at the front driver side wheel. This is the first wheel we'll be doing. And we gotta find the bleeder valve right here. And there's a little rubber cap on there. We're just gonna take our pick tool and kind of pry that off. Try to. There it goes. Next, we're gonna use a 10mm 6-pointed socket, and we're gonna break this bleeder valve loose. We don't want to turn it too far though, because we don't want fluid to start leaking yet, so just break it loose. There we go. You can hear it break. And now we're gonna take our 1/4 inch inner diameter vinyl tubing, and we're gonna place it on the end of this bleeder valve here. There we go. And then a very important aspect of this bleeding process is to ensure that the hose goes pretty much straight up, because that way the air will directly rise up and you'll get that air out of the system faster. And then we're gonna have it come right on down into our catch pan or a jug or something like that. But before we start, and very important obviously, we gotta make sure that the master cylinder is full of fluid. So now we're gonna take an open end 10mm wrench, and we're gonna turn it about up to a 1/4 turn or until fluid starts to come out. And then we'll get in the car and we're gonna push the brake pedal 5 times. Important note, we don't wanna push the brake pedal all the way down to the floor, because that can potentially damage system components. And we also wanna wait about 2 or 3 seconds in between each pedal push, just to ensure that we can let some of the air rise up through the tube. And also when you let go of the pedal, it does suck just a tiny bit of fluid and air back in. So if we wait just a second or two, it'll let the air bubbles rise up. I don't think there'll be much air, obviously, in the front 2 wheels, because we didn't have to replace anything there, but we're still gonna follow the proper order of sequence. There we go. We can see some fluid start to come out. So we'll get in the car and we'll push the brake pedal 5 times. Okay, and then we can lock it in place. And I don't see any air bubbles, so I think we can move on to the next wheel. And before we move on to the next one, we'll just torque this little nut down to 7 foot-pounds. And then we can put our little rubber cap back on. Also, in between each wheel and after each sequence of maybe 10 to 15 pedal pushes, we're just gonna check on our fluid reservoir and add fluid. We're at the front passenger side now. It's the same thing. The fluid reservoir is full of fluid. We got our tube pointing straight up. Let's go push the pedal 5 times. No air bubbles again, as expected. So we're gonna torque this little nut down to 7 foot-pounds. We'll fill up the reservoir and we'll move on to the rear passenger wheel now. Full reservoir, check. Tube pointing straight up, check. So let's go push that brake pedal 5 times. And so now we're going to keep repeating this process until we stop seeing air bubbles coming out, all while ensuring that we never let the fluid reservoir go dry. Okay, so I saw maybe 1 or 2 micro bubbles on that last run there. So I'd say A for effort. I don't want to completely run out of brake fluid, so I'm going to move on to that last line now. So again, torque it down to 7 foot-pounds, refill that reservoir. Let's move on to the last wheel, the rear driver's side wheel. All right, last wheel. And there we have it. We had a significantly fewer number of bubbles coming out of the rear driver's side compared to the rear passenger side. Of course, the rear driver's side is shorter, so that's to be expected. And again, torque it down to 7 foot-pounds, fill that reservoir, and we should be all good. So now with everything tightened down and everything torqued to spec, we're gonna come in the car and we're gonna push the pedal again another 5 to 10 times real hard. And that should feel really stiff, and it certainly does. And then we're gonna check every single flange bolt to make sure there isn't any fluid leak. So I thought I heard some dripping, and it's coming from this little joint up here. So I'm just gonna re-ensure that that is all tightened down properly. Next, we can put our 15 amp fuel pump fuse back in. Okay, and for our next major moment of truth, we're gonna start the car. And while we're at it, let's test the brakes. Alright, let's shut the car off. Check for any more leaks coming from the fuel or brake lines. Now we're going to start to put the clips back in place. We got this one for the brake line. We got these two up here for the fuel lines. We can push our evap filter back in its bracket. And then we're going to start by putting this rear black plastic trim piece on. Get the clips all in place on the lines first. And then you can maneuver this bracket over there, clamp that in place. Work this first nut in, and as you make your way down, ensure that the lines are in their proper positions to the best of your ability. It ain't gonna be perfect. There's gonna be more bending, more pulling, more forcing as you work on this part, but we're gonna start with this rear black plastic trim piece first. Now we can put this front piece of trim on, and we'll start by clipping it in right there and right there. And then again, we'll just kind of work our way down. And to the best of our ability, you can see I didn't do even a perfect job, but if you can, try and maneuver these lines properly back in place. We'll put this nut in. We'll put this nut in. And we'll come all the way to the front. And I couldn't get this little bracket in place, so I zip tied it. And it's working just as good. And also, after that black trim piece is in, if you have the ability, depending on your vehicle and what lines you get, you can put that little bracket back in place down there, and we should be all finished putting these lines back in. After all the lines are properly installed, we can put the wheels back on and torque those lug nuts down to 80 foot-pounds. Now we just need to take the car for a slow and careful test drive to ensure that the brakes are working properly. If they still feel squishy and just not right, there's a good chance that there's still some air in the system. That's not uncommon to happen. You'll just need to bleed the brakes again, try and get more air out, and retest as necessary. And after that initial drive, it's always a good idea to retorque those lug nuts down to 80 foot-pounds again. So now we're going to test our gas mileage to ensure it's normal and that we didn't miss any slow fuel leaks. So we're at the gas station and we're going to let the pump top off our fuel tank. Then we'll need to come into the car and we're going to reset the trip meter. And after a few hundred miles of driving, we'll come back to the gas station and let the pump top off our gas tank again. Now we can take the number of miles on our trip meter, such as 342.7, divide that by the number of gallons we just put in our car, 14.841, and that'll give us our current gas mileage, 23.1 miles per gallon, which for me is normal and confirms that there are no fuel or vapor leaks on the lines we just installed. Excellent. Everything is working great and not leaking, so we are all finished. I just want to say thanks for watching. I hope this video could provide you all with the necessary tips and tricks to tackle this difficult job and save you tons of time and money. If it did, remember to give the video a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing for more great in-depth DIY videos like this. Don't forget to check out the description for more information, links to parts used, and timestamps to go back and better navigate through the video. Also feel free to leave a comment with any questions, thoughts, or tips you might have. So again, thanks for watching, have a great day, and take care.